So since it's your anniversary, girls love flowers, but Dr. Dean, you can also look at them and gaze upon them and enjoy them as well. And then there's a nice fat gift certificate in the bag for you, Dr. Dean, but you can share it with Ayesha. Okay, of course you will. We love you. Thank you so much for serving us on your anniversary. Okay. Oh,
You start.
I'm sorry. Guys, come back. Do you want me in the photo or you just want them in the photo? I want to be in the photo.
Oh,
With the flowers, I'm sorry.
Here, let me hold on to them.
You want the flowers, not me? Whatever. Ooh, those are pretty. Yes, they work, they live what they preach.
all right. 3, 2, 1. One more. 3, 2, 1.
I know it.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mrs. Angela Evans, my sister. Thank you, friends, for being here. Pastor Price, thank you for being here and for inviting us to. You guys are our family now, and this is such an amazing opportunity for us to discuss something that both Dean and I are very passionate about, which is brain health, but not just in a clinical sense. So we're both doctors. We work in a clinic and in the hospital, but our hearts are in the community. It's here because we believe this is the perfect venue to propagate the message of hope, of empowerment about something that is so painful, that is so devastating, that is ravaging our communities. Diseases like stroke, like dementia, Alzheimer's, and other mental health issues, depression, anxiety, ADHD. They're robbing us of who we are because, as Mrs. Evans said, we are our brains at the end of the day. You can replace any other organ in the body, your kidneys, your liver, your heart. But the minute you replace your brain, that's not you. So how you interact with people, how you feel, your joys, your fears, your anxieties, the purpose of life comes from this magnificent organ. So I think it is our responsibility to take care of our brains, and not just our brains, but to be able to spread this message of hope to everyone else that we don't have to suffer. We don't have to experience strokes and Alzheimer's disease and other mental health issues. So with that, I will have Dean start the conversation.
Thank you so much. Let's see.
Oh,
You have the PowerPoint?
I do?
Okay.
Let me see if I can fix it while you speak.
So again, thank you all for being here. Not to repeat what Ayesha said, but it is critical that we come at this. I'm going to start with this statement, and we're going to end with this statement. Brain health can start at any age, and it should start at every age, because it's not just about Alzheimer's. It's not just about dementia. It's about our brain health that we're experiencing minute by minute. We have tremendous control of our brain health capacity. We're living in a world of social media where everything is about biohacking and the next superfood and next super vitamin and all that. None of those work. I'll tell you that right now. Those are gimmicks. But a more concerted effort can give you tremendous amount of power over those things that we always talk about. Everybody's talking about focus. Everybody's talking about cognitive capacity, processing, speed. You don't notice it, but you're really, truly affecting it day by day, minute by minute. So that's what's important to actually have in mindset as we give this talk, that everything we do can profoundly affect you. It's not the 1, 2, 3 vitamins or this concoction or that concoction, or even things like kale, which we love, and all of this stuff, but it's much more concerted and powerful. So with that, I want to start with this amazing organ. It's the brain. 3 pounds, 2% of our body's weight, but can consume, not can, does consume 25% of our body's energy and up to 50% of our oxygen. It's an overwhelmed organ. It was not expected to live much longer than 30 years or so, but we're doing well. We're doing in our 50s, 60s, and I want to live longer and healthier. But at the same time, this brain is overwhelmed. We sleep because of this organ. We literally, the very purpose of sleep is to give respite, to give rehabilitation, to give comfort, to give a space for this brain to recoup. That's the whole purpose of sleep. And we'll talk about what that means to you on a daily basis. And we have 87 billion neurons. But more importantly, and this is important to all of us, each of those neurons can make a couple of connections or as many as 30,000 connections. Now, the number of neurons don't change that much. But what does change, and changes by minute, is the connections. Each of the neurons can make a couple of connections or 30,000 connections. Do the math, 87,000 times 2, or 87 billion times 30,000. That's the level of capacity. That's actually 15,000 times greater capacity that one can have. And it can happen on a daily basis. When you're doing something that challenges your brain, you're actually making connection. When you're exercising, you're making connections. When you're eating healthy, you're making connections. But those happen on a daily basis. Imagine, the reason I'm bringing that up, because that's tremendous power that we have by just doing simple things. This is the graph that I want you guys to live. I want this community to live the green line. Majority of us, majority of the United States and the West and most of the world is living the red line. The decline starts early. How early do you think that decline starts? In our 20s. So the largest number of growth as far as neurons are concerned is in the first year. Then up to 4 years of age. And at 4 years of age, actually you have more neurons than ever in life. And what happens, there's a thing called apoptosis, programmed cell death. There's actually a dying of the neurons. But the purpose of that is to leave behind an infrastructure. We even have control over that. We're actually writing a book on that right now, or a couple of chapters on that. That those first 4 years, what you do affects how that restructuring is happening. And nobody talks about that. And that's critical because that lays the foundation. Susan knows that, to me, the most important project in America is the first 5 years. If we invest in those first 5 years, all these fights, I'm not going to get into the politics, and if you're right, left, middle, center, whatever, invest in the first 5 years and you've just changed an entire nation. That's critical. And that's just part of it, which is the brain development part. It's critical. But there is a possibility of living the green life, which means the brain continues to grow, continues to prosper, continues to actually increase capacity. And we've seen this in Loma Linda, and it's a phenomenal model. We're writing this, which is same area, San Bernardino and Loma Linda, but people in Loma Linda live in their 90s and beyond, but not just living longer. They live 12 years longer and healthier than everyone else in the world. Not 12 days. All these pills are such that even on TV, at their best, they're saying you're going to have a year better memory. No, they're all false, first of all. But we're talking about 12 years longer and healthier, and that's coming from data, significant, powerful data. And more importantly, they're also living without dementia. In my clinic, 5 years collected data, 5 years. So you remember that you're on TV, on social media, you see somebody say, oh, I did this and my life changed. Well, that's an anecdote. Yes, I changed my life as far as diet and my migraine went away. But you never hear me talking about my case because that's a case of one that means nothing. It's about population-based. In my clinic, 5,000 people, most of the people that come to me would be the Seventh-day Adventists, the community, Loma Linda, and all of those. But out of those people, you expect 1/3 of the dementia patients, or actually more because they have more proclivity to come to the Loma Linda, at least 1/3 of them to be from that community, right? That live a certain way. They eat better, healthier. Out of the 3,000 people, 5 years, only 19 people lived a certain type of life, which we'll describe to you. 19. It was supposed to be 1/3. That's beyond any data out there. That's remarkable. So, and then in San Bernardino, where we did the free clinic, we worked half a day a week because we wanted to serve there. We see 40-year-olds with dementia. We see 40-year-olds with strokes. And more importantly, something that's not recorded in the medical system because there's no ICD-10 because nobody can charge, is vascular brain diseases that start earlier. You don't see the effect profoundly, but you know that they're getting slower and slower, but it's not being recorded. And everybody who came to us had vascular disease in their 40s and 50s. And what was the difference? It wasn't geography, it was a certain type of lifestyle. And that was to us the most powerful data out there. So we want the whole purpose of our life, I'm not being bombastic, I think on our 19th anniversary we can make that commitment. The whole purpose of our life is that we can make this difference in as many communities as possible. The subject of my PhD was, where do you make that difference? Is it in the clinic? No, not for anybody. It's disease-based. It's great, it's important. Somebody has cancer, they need to go to clinic. If somebody has a stroke, they need to go. But 80% of healthcare should be focused on prevention. And guess how much of the funding is focused on prevention? Zero, pretty much. I mean, they will give you a number, but in meaning, as far as truly making a difference, zero. So the community-based is where it should be done. But as we go forward, I want to focus on one disease, but it's actually not just about this disease. It's about many diseases. This is Alzheimer's. We're talking about a disease where 6.7 million, actually it's now 6.8 million people that suffer from it today. Dementia is the big umbrella category. Alzheimer's is a major type of dementia, about 80%, 70% of all dementias. But that one disease alone is 6.7 million. Every 64 seconds, somebody's being diagnosed with dementia and Alzheimer's. By the way, that's an understatement because in a lot of communities, like Native American communities, where it's not even being recorded. They're just keeping it among themselves, it's aging, and there's no help, no treatment, no resources. Many communities are like that, and it's growing. That number is actually wrong, the fifth. It's actually number 3 in the United States. In UK, it's number 1. In Japan, it's number 1. In most of the Western countries, it will be number 1 within the next 5 years, and it's growing rapidly. And that's just Alzheimer's. That doesn't even take into consideration vascular cognitive dementia, which is another one that we talk about. Doesn't take into account stroke, which was Ayesha's specialty. 700,000 people have major strokes every year. Millions have minor strokes every year, but nobody records those. So this is what we're hoping to make a difference in. As I said, dementia is the umbrella category. Alzheimer's is one type, vascular dementia, frontotemporal lobe dementia, and others as well. All of them are affected by lifestyle, different degrees, but all of them are affected by what we do in our homes, in our communities, profoundly more than what happens in the clinic. The clinic part is important, so we're not the kind of doctor that throws the baby out with the bathwater. Medicine is important. If you have blood pressure, you can't wait till lifestyle takes care of it. If you have 180 blood pressure, oh, I'm gonna eat healthy. Nope, medicine now. And that's part of one of the first things we did the last session we had was give away blood pressure monitoring devices, because that's a critical, vital thing that every household should have, to know their blood pressure, their LDL, write it down, you have notes, LDL, of all these numbers where social media people coming and making it fancy, a combination. Nope, LDL. And then the last one is glucose, which is diabetes or pre-diabetes. Even pre-diabetes, we did a study, a major study in NHANES, which showed that even pre-diabetics, when non-treated, had lower cognitive state. Which doctor talks to you about this? Because they don't, not that because they're being nefarious, because that's not their area of knowledge. Prevention is not what they do. It's treatment, which is fine. But prevention is more important. Blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, or even pre-diabetes. So hemoglobin A1C, LDL, and blood pressure numbers, which is what we want to teach. If we just do that in the community, we've done massive, massive work. 1 in 9 individuals suffer from dementia, Alzheimer's specifically, by the time they get to a particular age. That doesn't even include stroke, that doesn't include vascular dementia. If you include all of those, literally 70% of the population after 65 is suffering from some of those elements. It kills more than breast cancer and prostate cancer combined. Again, I'm going to repeat, that's just Alzheimer's. And if you take that in consideration with everything else, it's the fastest growing epidemic we have. It's the biggest silent epidemic that's affecting us, the vascular diseases of the brain, the diseases of the brain altogether. Whereas we're succeeding in treating many of the other diseases, or at least maintaining them, heart disease, diabetes, HIV, cancers. Look at the mortality in Alzheimer's in the last 10 years. Grown by 147%. And the same is true for vascular dementia. It's massive growth. The cost is absolutely overwhelming. I always feel uncomfortable showing this because to me, it's not just financial costs, it's social costs. We both had two grandparents each that died from Alzheimer's. My grandfather was an amazing human being, and her grandfather was an amazing human being, and we saw them lose little bits of themselves. And Ron knows about this, how people go through this journey, and it's a terrible thing to see this person that was the most powerful human being I knew. We would gather in Virginia in our farm. I'm a family of surgeons, and so surgeons think they're hunters, and thank goodness for animals, they're terrible hunters. Even when they had a huge farm, we would gather and they would use the light and cheat and all that, and the deer would still run away. And then they would go to Giant Eagle or Kroger's and buy meat. And then they would fake it. But nonetheless, we would sit, and my grandfather would be sitting in the center, and all the grandchildren playing chess. It's a thing in our house, chess. Not that we're good, but it's a thing in our house. But he was good, and he would play with us, and then one of the times, he forgot how to move the knight. And for those who play the chess, they know that knight is a little weird L thing. And everybody was taken aback. This giant, how is he forgetting? And that moment, I was young, I think that was the formative moment for all of us. And Ayesha has a similar story with her grandfather, who was the prime minister and graduated from Johns Hopkins and Columbia and a surgeon, and then he didn't know the name of his child. There's nothing more painful than that. So I always get emotional, go with it. I'm an emotional person. I'm the guy that cries in Kung Fu Panda too, but that's okay. Nonetheless, not to digress, the cost is overwhelming. The second costliest disease in America is heart disease, $120 billion. Third is cancers, all combined, $70 billion. The direct and indirect cost of Alzheimer's alone, if you take all dementia, is more than $500 billion. And that number is going to go over $1 trillion over the next few years. $1 trillion, which will by itself collapse our healthcare system. What are we doing for it? Still looking for that one drug that's going to cure that one mouse. And then everybody sees it on social media. Oh, it cured that mouse. Mice do not men make. I keep using that line and I like it. But it's critical that we understand that the path to therapy is the community. African Americans, the minority populations, BIPOP, the Hispanic, Native Americans, but especially African Americans, have much greater proclivity for dementias and Alzheimer's, significantly more. Some people say 3 times, some people say 4 times. The reality is, from our perspective, it's probably close to 4 times, and it has nothing to do with genetics. If I had time, I would give you the Nigeria data. I would give you other data where those populations that have the gene for Alzheimer's, ApoE4, much higher percentage of ApoE4 gene in Nigerian population. There, they have much lower dementia risk. But when they come to the United States, the same population, the same genetic pool, their risk goes sky high. What was the difference? Lifestyle. Same thing with the Japanese population. In Japan, they live in their 90s, 100, incredibly healthy. Nagasaki and other, I mean, we're talking about 90-year-olds that can still work. They come to the United States, initially Hawaii, they lose a few years. They come to San Francisco, they lose significant. And then if they've been here a generation, they die at the same rate as the rest of America and with the same rate of dementia. And so what is the difference? Lifestyle, the community. That's what the significant thing is. But in the African American community, 4 times greater. So we really have to start addressing this. The other population that's suffering more is the women, twice as much. And it's not just because they're living longer. And we know that's not the fact. It's other variables as well. Environmental stressors. Women have greater stress in their life. You can ask my wife, 19 years. You can ask all of us. Yeah. So, but more importantly, there's the vascular components that we have to address. The amount of research that needs to be done, we're not even close to the research needs to be done in women. Non-existent. When we were at Cedars-Sinai, we were just beginning to talk about hormones and their effect, and when to be given, and all of these things that have profound effect. We know that hormones are important to, for example, people in their 50s, or so, but when and what proximity, the research is not there, and that's because the focus has not been there. So the myths that I want to address, because in order to shift being a neurobehaviorist, to change human behavior change, there are always these tacit, quiet little breaks that stops you from moving forward. Sometimes you're not even aware of it, but it's there. These are the myths that's stopping you from moving forward. So the first myth is that it cannot be prevented. And we know that it can be prevented. We've shown it. We were the first people to coin the term preventive neurology. And it's important, when we first said it, it was not a popular thing. It was actually saying, you know, you're against science and so on. So I was, no, we're scientists. But reality is the data is profound that you can do it. But it has to start early. It has to be more prevalent and more common and as early as possible. But even later in life, it's effective. And the other reason that we've been toward it is because we, as scientists, we get focused into little things, little windows. Everybody's doing their little research on amyloid and tau, and just for years and years and years, and 20, 30 years is gone, but not looking at the bigger picture. You know what, you know, you have to look at the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is not just those two molecules. The second myth is that it's a genetic disease. Yes, it's a genetic disease. Everything is genetic. We are genetic beings. Even our behaviors are determined by genes. I was reading this whole thing about people who migrate their R7 gene, dopamine, which is the motivation gene, is different. So, oh, wait a second, why did they move? Oh, they had a motivational gene, which means that they are less anxious about change. So there's a genetic component for being anxious or not anxious for genes. So even behavior is genetically driven. All activities are genetically, but different degrees. Some diseases, like Huntington's disease, it's 100%. If you have it, you're going to get it. And it's so sad. You see a father that has it, and you do the genetic test, and you find that lesion on chromosome 4, and you have to tell the children, you're going to get it, and it's going to look like this, and it's terrible, and it's going to probably happen in your 30s. Imagine living with that. And there's nothing you can do. It's going to start with behavioral stuff, then movement stuff, then your brain is going to shrink, and I have to tell them this. Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, a lot of other dementias, stroke, are not driven by genes. They have genetic components, don't get me wrong, but lifestyle has a much greater influence than genes. We know the genetic look of Alzheimer's. We actually know the genetic look of a lot of diseases now. In the last 5 years, the amount of research has been overwhelming. We know that nearly 50 genes are involved in Alzheimer's, but only 3% of Alzheimer's is driven by 100% penetrant genes, meaning that if you have these genes, you're going to get the disease. It's the same kind of gene as Huntington's disease. Of course, it's different, but meaning that if you have the gene, you're going to get the Alzheimer's. The percentage of Alzheimer's that's driven by those genes is 3%. Left upper corner. My laser is not working. Okay. Sorry? Okay. APP, PSEN2, PSEN1. 3%. And you won't see those around you. They're in clusters of populations in South America, and clusters of populations in Portugal, and sometimes they come here and you see, but the rest of us are this other soup of genes. These are not Alzheimer's genes. They are lifestyle genes. We call them lifestyle genes. So the biggest next one is ApoE4, the one in the middle. Do you see the ApoE4? If you have one of those genes, your risk goes up 4 times. If you have 2 of those genes, your risk goes up 12 times. So does that mean that if you have the genes, you're going to get the disease? No, 50% have never developed the disease. In fact, as I said earlier, in Nigerian population, they have one of the highest propensity for ApoE4, in Nigeria, they have the lowest propensity for Alzheimer's. What happened there? Well, you get a clue when you find out what ApoE4 does. ApoE4 codes for a protein that transports lipids, fat. It codes for a protein that transports fat. So if you have ApoE2, you're protected. You can eat all the burgers you want. I can assure you none of you have it, so you can't go out and do that. But if you have ApoE4, your body doesn't do an efficient job of transporting lipids. It clogs up small arteries. It affects the brain, and the amyloid and all that happens downstream. But the damage happens early. So there's a comedian, I'm aging myself, Red Skelton. He said, "Doctor, it hurts when I do this." What's the answer? Don't do it. That's right. So I'm not that old, but I love that idea that a simple behavior can make a difference. Eating less of this, more of that. That's it. And we'll get to what the expert will speak to that. I'm just the messenger at this point. The rest of the genes, what are those genes for? Inflammation, oxidation, getting rid of garbage, meaning the waste that builds up in your body. What does that tell you? So if you have bad genes for those, don't eat the food that creates inflammation. Don't do the activities that create inflammation. Don't do the kind of things that build up waste. What is that? Sugar. I'm sorry, I'm giving away some of this stuff, yeah. But it's that simple. It's not a magical concoction. It's the simple things that will make massive difference in communities. So the third one is that it's going to be one medication. Every day you see another medication that says, oh, we did this to remove amyloid, and we do this, and then we're saying we're all for that. We really truly think that in the next 10 years there will be cures for all cancers. Yes, you heard me. And a lot of other diseases. But even then, you're not going to create the decay. You're not going to affect the decay, which is important, but that's in 10, 15 years. What about now? And what about the decay which happens now? That's important, that one drug is not going to be a solution at all. So far, there are no treatments for dementia. We only treat the symptoms. Donepezil, which is Aricept, and Namenda, and all these drugs, they don't help with the curve. They don't help with the decline. The disease continues at the same rate. You're just helping with the symptoms a little bit. The memory gets a little better, but underneath, the damages continue until the person falls. We have no cure. We have no treatment at all. And the last one, which is, this is important for everybody here, no matter what age you're at, that Alzheimer's starts when you start forgetting, or stroke starts when you have a paralysis, or vascular dementia starts when you're having some gait problems or Parkinson's. It doesn't start then. That's the straw and the camel thing that you're seeing. But the infrastructure is actually being degraded way before then. Way before then. You don't see the effect. We just did a huge study on omega-3. You don't see changes in the Middle Ages, in the 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s, not because the damage is not happening. It's a beautiful building with lots of scaffoldings, and you're looking at the building from outside, the brain, the effect of the brain. So you're not going to see holes for a while. But what's happening in your 20s is you're not eating healthy, if you're not moving, if you're having head trauma, the scaffoldings are falling. The building's still there. The scaffoldings are falling. Yeah, your focus is affected, you're seeing that, but you're just, I'm young, that's nothing. And you know, all these little elements, but the scaffolding of the building is until there's a point where that one pivotal scaffolding is taken away and the building starts crumbling. That's what's happening. That starts earlier. By the way, you have the ability to rebuild the scaffolding. Each neuron being able to connect 2 times or 30 times, 30,000 times, is that scaffolding. Actually, powerful scaffolding. Well, I actually tell people that I pride myself in never exaggerating the truth. It's not even about truth. That's a given in our household. But I say when you overstate a truth, it's a fallacy. When you understate a truth, it's a fallacy. The problem in our world is not that people are not telling their truth. They're not weighing their truth with the bigger picture. I'm telling you this, that everything you do from this moment on can profoundly build that scaffolding. And by the way, what I'm going to tell you, what Ayesha will tell you, the things you have to do, they're all free. You don't have to pay anybody anything, anytime. soon for those medicines or concoctions or any of that stuff. And it will never be coming from us, I can tell you that right now. It will not. We have some people that are with us and they know. We are very much against that kind of charlatanism. It's just pure things that you can do at home. So let's change that curve. Let's change that curve in our 20s, actually younger. There was a study done on 12-year-olds that were not eating well, had sugar problems and all that, and we were worried about ADD and ADHD. Guess what they found in those 12-year-olds? White matter disease of the brain. And why wasn't that on CNN? Why wasn't that on TV? Because it's not a narrative that's helpful for a lot of people. So we can start that process early, eating healthy, movement, all of this stuff. Schools that are taking away exercise from, are you kidding me? Movement is the most critical factor for attention, for anxiety, for depression, all of that, which I'll speak to in a second. And so we have to start as early as possible. It's never too late, never too early to start. These are the risk factors. Genetic, yeah, age is not in itself a risk factor. If you're doing bad things, the accumulation of those bad things over the years is bad. But if you're living longer and doing good things, the accumulation of those good things is exponentially good. So that's an indirect. And then all these things on the right, which is cholesterol and diabetes and blood pressure and obesity, lack of exercise, unhealthy diet. Each of them have been studied thoroughly, so we can affect those. Evidence for prevention, there are dozens and dozens of studies.
And I think it's important to just look at this slide, because a lot of times with diseases like Alzheimer's or dementia and stroke, people feel helpless. And we always think of the things that are not under our control. So the slide actually shows that, yeah, there are certain things that we have no control over. We don't control what our parents went through and whether they had the risk for developing a disease. We don't have, as women, we don't have control over our bodies going through the changes, the hormonal changes that we experience as we age. But there are so many things that are still under our control. The way we eat, our cholesterol levels, our blood pressure, our sugar levels, how we move. This is probably the most important message in a community setting from a preventive perspective, that yes, there is so much we can do. Yes, these diseases can be prevented. And there are a lot of, as Dean was saying, there are a lot of different research studies, and I could spend days going over each and every paper with all of you. Yeah, I'm kind of go nuts and bonkers over papers, but I'm not going to do that. But there are lists and lists of large populations. Large populations, we're talking about 120, 130, 140,000 people, men and women, that have been followed since the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and these people have been involved, right? They give their information, they go to the hospital, they get their blood sugar levels, cholesterol checked. So we actually have been able to see them for 20, 30, 40 years of how they do when they live a certain life. How do they do when they exercise? How do they do when they eat certain foods? How do they do when they have sleep problems and they don't take care of it? And over again. This is the list of all of those amazing, incredible cohort studies. We call them cohort studies that have given us information about the profound effect of lifestyle and prevention on brain health. I'm going to pull one of them. So scientists at Rush University in Chicago, they looked at a pool of people and they said, you know, and I'm actually talking about this study because I think most of us have experienced or seen a loved one go through dementia. I mean, nowadays, almost every household has a loved one who's been experiencing dementia. And so they looked at what is the impact of genes versus lifestyle on brain health. So they looked at a group of people who had the genes for dementia. And they had 60% higher risk of developing dementia, right? And in the same pool of people, when they looked at their lifestyle, if they had unhealthy lifestyle, their risk of developing dementia went up by 360%. That's the influence of an unhealthy lifestyle on top of bad genes. But look at this. If the same people had healthier lifestyle, if they took care of themselves, their risk fell to less than 30%. What does that mean? It means that when we adhere to a healthy lifestyle, genes don't even matter. You can actually offset the impact of that genetic risk with a healthy lifestyle. That's the message. That's the empowering message that we want to share with everyone. Same study, different group. They looked at a dementia risk score. So scientists come up with some really very, very interesting ways of finding out, if two people are compared, what is his risk of developing dementia and what is my risk of developing dementia? So they created a formula. And in that formula, they put dietary patterns, exercise, cutting down on alcohol, cutting down on smoking or not smoking, and cognitive engagement, keeping our minds active, like you guys are doing right now. And they found out that if people did not adhere to any of these, right, compared to people who did not adhere to any of these lifestyle factors, those who adhere to 2 or 3 of them, say for example, they exercised, they ate well, and they kept their minds active, their risk of developing dementia was 37% lower. That's phenomenal, right? But if they adhere to about 4 or 5 of them, so the more they did, they reduced their risk by 60%. That's incredible. So the more we do, the better. And it also, I feel that this is a very empowering message because it's not an all or none phenomenon. Every tiny step, every small thing we do matters and makes a huge difference for our brain health. So we came up with an acronym, PREVENT, just to highlight the importance of these lifestyle risk factors. And you have them in your notes. And there's 1 page for each and every word in this acronym, PREVENT.
They can take notes.
Yes, you can take notes. So P stands for practicing mindfulness and positive thinking, which is so important at this day and age. R is for resting, for restoring, for repairing, and this is mainly about sleep, which we will talk about. E is for exercise. V is for volunteering, that human connection that keeps us alive. E is for exchanging bad stress for good stress. Yes, there is such a thing as good stress, and Dean will talk about it because he loves it. N is for nourish, how we nourish each and every cell in our body and our brains. Food is so important. That's why I went to cooking school, because I am very passionate about healthy eating and about food. I love food. And T is for training your brain, keeping those connections alive, making more connections. Whether you're 9 years old or 99 years old, you can continuously make those connections. So Dean is going to talk about practicing mindfulness and positive thinking.
So this is not this little soft mindfulness thing, which is not soft in itself either, but nonetheless, it's about a perspective that I have control over the future. Whatever I do, I can make a difference in my own brain health and my health. It's a positive attitude about the way forward. It doesn't, if you look at any neurobehavioral model of behavior change, if that's not affected, the next step is not taken. Or if it is taken, it slides right back. You know those New Year resolutions? Yeah. Because the idea is that whole mentality has to change. A perspective has to change. You can't just superficially superimpose a diet and then expect that to do some magical thing. The diet is nothing. It's your mindset that has to change, and that's the first step that we want to talk about. Mindfulness it will increase neural connectivity, hippocampal size. It actually changes your stress relationship, but more importantly, it is the #1 motivational tool. I don't like the word motivation. I think it's the most demotivating word there is. What is motivation? If you have a word that you can't do anything with it, I know that a lot of people are making a lot of money about this motivation, rah, but it's about clear steps of action that lead to something that is success, which actually then turns on this thing called dopamine and creates motivation and movement. So it has to be around that. And once you have this mindset that I'm going to be in control and I'm going to be doing X, Y, and Z, it's going to be in steps, and there will be failures and slides. There's no failures. We call it process improvement. In our household, there's a wall that you can write on. Actually, the dining room. It's a ping pong table and a wall. All the walls you can write on. The kids go there. And it's not about failure. It's about what we can do to process improve. So I want the word failure to go out. That's another reason people actually then give up on things, is because they thought they failed. And psychologically, we get ourselves out of that because we think, oh, I don't want to feel that again. There's no failure. It's process improvement. So all of that is mindset change. How to respond to stress, perspective matters. There was a Harvard study where, and this is actually a very popular Harvard study. We spoke in our podcast with one of the leads. Two groups were given the same task, large group, the same task, but they were given words ahead of time. One group was given the positive words. This is challenging. I'm going to feel my heart beating fast. And athletes will tell you this as well. My heart's beating fast, my hands are getting sweaty, but that means that I'm excited. That means that I'm excited, that I'm motivated. This is going to change my life. It's going to be great. That all the positive words. The other group was given the words like, oh, it's tough. It's going to be difficult. When your heart beats fast, it's probably some anxiety and those kind of words. Then they went on and performed the same task. The group with the positive language was profoundly better, did profoundly better than the people with the negative language. Again, it comes to perspective. The things that we can change, we will change. The things that we can't change, then you have to have language around it to kind of give you, meaning, purpose, direction. For a while, we were driving 2 hours a day. This poor lady was driving 2 hours a day to Loma Linda and back with me on a daily basis. So 4 hours, something we couldn't change. And so our perspective was, this serves a purpose. We did a lot of work there. We got a lot of things done and never felt the tension at all. I never felt the tension. So you can ask her what she felt. Yeah. So the next thing is rest and sleep.
I got a little PTSD from those days.
Yes, thank you.
All right, rest, repair, and restore. This is about sleep. So sleep is something that, I personally have ignored it quite a lot. And I don't think we prioritize sleep. We always think that sleep is kind of a waste of time. How many times you've tried to delay your sleep to get things done, right? Like, I'll sleep later, or I have to wake up earlier in the morning to do things of that nature. But I would love for you all to think of sleep as the most important time in the day from here on. It really is. Because even though you don't really remember anything when you go to sleep, you're completely unconscious. Your brain is the most active organ when your eyes are shut and when you're sleeping. It actually cleanses itself. It serves two purposes. The first thing that happens when we sleep is cleansing happens. I'm showing you the structure of sleep. So we go through these cycles, 90-minute cycles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Usually we go between 4 or 5 cycles every night, and there are different stages. So you're awake, and then you go into what we call rapid eye movement or REM sleep. You probably have heard about REM sleep. That's when we dream. And then there is stage 1, 2, and 3. That N1, N2, and 3, these are the different stages of sleep. You have to hit N3, which is the deepest stage of sleep, for your brain to cleanse itself and for your memories to get organized. I want you to picture a very messy office desk. My office desk is very messy at times. Imagine that during the day, you gather information and you write everything down in little Post-it notes. Those like little yellow Post-it notes? You get this information, that conversation, that person said this, I did that, oh, I heard this on the news, I read this on Twitter, da-da-da-da. All of these small little pieces of information are written on random pieces of Post-it notes on your desk, and it's messy, and you've got like thousands of these Post-it notes. Guess what happens when we sleep? Miraculously, all of that information gets typed in a beautiful Word document. It gets saved on a file, in a folder, in a cabinet for you, so that next day, when you want to retrieve a memory or when you want to think about something, you know where it is, right? But when you don't sleep, all of those Post-it notes still are there, and then you just come to this random mess, and you can't recognize any piece of information. They've done studies on children, on young people, when they were given a curriculum, a chapter, something to study, something to read, and they were tested the next day. Those who slept well did very well. They could remember everything. Those who didn't get enough sleep, their scores plummeted. And this is something that you don't have to wait until your 60s and 70s to experience. Even children, young people, teenagers, people in their 20s, 30s, 40s experience that. And if you pay attention to yourself, you'll recognize that on the days when you haven't had good sleep, the next day you're slower. You have to think harder. You're not yourself because you're emotionally controlling yourself, so you're not your powerful self anymore. It's as if you're just an unstable human being. And imagine going through this over and over again for years and years and years and years and years. They now know that people who have sleep disorders have more of the bad proteins that cause dementia. They actually have damage to the arteries in their brain. They actually have damage to the infrastructure of the brain. They can't make those connections that Dean was talking about between cells anymore because they haven't had an opportunity to rest and restore. We have a very, very interesting system called the glymphatic system. The glymphatic system is responsible for getting rid of all of the garbage and the debris from your brain when you sleep. I want you to picture a building, okay? When the building gets emptied and everybody goes home after a hard day's work, there's a janitorial team that comes in and starts cleaning up everything. You probably have seen that, right? That happens at night when everybody's gone. That's exactly what happens in our brain too. When we go to sleep and we go through those deeper stages of sleep, this system gets activated. And what it does, there's fluid and cells that just kind of wash through the brain and get rid of all of the debris and just dumps it out. But if we don't reach those stages of sleep because of some of the things that I'm going to tell you, and it's very, very common, this doesn't get activated. What stops this system from being activated? There are multiple factors: environmental factors, nutrition or food, and emotional issues. As far as environmental factors are concerned, too much light. And I'm not talking about keeping the lights on. Do you know what I'm talking about? Your cell phones, computers, having a TV in our bedroom. That is one of the unhealthiest things we can do.
Scary movies.
Scary movies for some people. The blue light that comes from our phone, it actually activates a part of the brain that tells us that it's still daytime, that you don't have to sleep. And it takes a very long time for our brain to shut off. So light is very important. So dimming your lights, putting your phone away, I know it's hard, I know it's very hard, putting your phone away at least half an hour before going to bed actually trains your brain that it's time to sleep and you need to go to sleep. And there are hormones and chemicals that are created in your brain that gets you ready for going to bed. So it's really important to put your phone away. Soundproofing your home. Temperature. Lowering temperature is very important. Of course, men and women are different. Women like it a little warmer, men like it colder. But having the right temperature is important. I didn't even put some of the details like your pillow, neck pain, some musculoskeletal issues. People have, joint issues or muscle aches and pains if they exercise too late at night. So don't exercise too late at night, exercise in the morning. Your bed sheets, the smell in your household, all of that really, really matters. Allergies. As far as food is concerned, caffeine. So again, caffeine is an entire lecture that I would love to speak with you all about, but caffeine stays in your system for 8 hours. There's a half-life, they call it a half-life when a chemical is in your body. The half-life of caffeine is 8 hours, so you really have to time your caffeine, to make sure that you don't have any right afternoon. Like at 12 p.m., no more caffeine in the afternoon. And as we grow older, we become more and more sensitive to caffeine. So it's important to kind of cut it down there. Eating too close to bedtime. Don't eat at least 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Have an early dinner or supper, and then just let your body rest. Because even if you don't hear the food in your stomach, your body continues to metabolize all the sugars, all the fat, all the protein, and it keeps you awake. It's a constant source of energy in your body, and you're just all wide awake. So make sure that you kind of snack a little bit if you're very hungry, but not eat big dinners before bedtime. And then cognitive behavioral therapy. We always associate thinking when we go to bed. Most of us do, at least, right? The silliest of things can become a monster when you hit your head on the pillow. So writing it down, keeping it away, and addressing it later, and getting help for those of us who have serious problems, and there are so many people who have serious problems of not being able to shut down their brain, with cognitive behavioral therapy to disassociate bedtime from thinking and worrying. And that takes a long time, but there are a lot of great things that people can do in therapies. Dean will talk about exercise.
Yes, thank you. So exercise is more important than you think. Whereas nutrition sleep and stress management create the environment for growth. Stop the decay. Stop the onslaught of all these damages. The two things that actually grow the brain are exercise and mental activity. So exercise actually grows your brain. Study after study. Any age, any stage, even MCIs, people who are pre-dementias. Mild cognitive impairment is pre-dementia for majority. And even at that stage, people who increased their exercise actually had enlargement of their brain, specific areas of the brain. Exercise grows your brain connections, better blood flow, reduces depression, anxiety, attention deficit, reduces the risks of vascular diseases and dementia. The most effective treatment for anxiety, we're not against the medicines, they have their place, but adjunct on top of, aside from exercise, has been shown in many studies to be 3 times more effective than any medicine. Regular exercise is critical. Depression, again, I'm saying this for a reason. I'm not saying this to protect. No, we believe that medicine works. So, but one of the best treatments of depression, or actually reducing the risk, or on top of medication, significantly is exercise. And one study from Harvard showed that people who do a brisk walk, and I love brisk walks. I'm not a runner. We are in this world of lifestyle, so we see these people who are ultra runners, Goggin and others, some of you might know them, and 100 miles, 70 miles of running. I'm like, why? There's a car. But nonetheless, it doesn't go well with him. My favorite exercise, brisk walk, bicycling, swimming. These are things that are non-traumatic, they're non-dramatic, and they're easy to do. One study showed that people that did 25 minutes of brisk walk, and the brisk is the operative term. So whenever we talk to our patients, oh, Dr. Sherzai, I'm fine with exercise. I do gardening, and I walk the neighborhood. And I walk the dogs. I'm like, that's great, but that's meditation. You got to get tired. You have to get tired. 25 minutes of brisk walk reduces your chance of Alzheimer's by 40%. That doesn't include vascular disease, which is even more probably. That study has not been done, but I'm 100% sure it's more than that. That anxiety, we said 3 times more effective than any medicine. Depression. When we do program with communities, our first point of contact, where's our exercise person in the community? Right. Yeah, there we go. You will be proud of me. Our first point of contact, the first thing that we want people to do is a morning brisk exercise. Why morning? Because it resets the melatonin cortisol pathway, which actually helps you sleep the next night. That resets it. By the way, another thing about sleep is a regularity. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, and in the morning, as soon as you wake up, a brisk walk. Sunlight helps with vitamin D, which protects the brain, helps with mood, with everything else. And then the exercise itself in the morning, it resets the movement. Talking about all these talking heads on the internet about dopamine, this and this. The thing that resets your dopamine motivational pathways is that morning walk, early in the morning. So if you're going to start this journey with us, start with a morning walk. That's the critical factor. And the same is true for other kinds of exercises. So it's not just aerobic exercise, which is walking, running, that kind of thing that gets your heart beating fast. Weight lifting, weight-bearing exercises. One of our most important exercises is leg strength. One of the most important parts of your body is your legs. The biggest pump in your body is not the heart, it's the legs that pumps the blood from up. People who had bigger legs actually had bigger brains. They did twin studies that looked at same twins, and they went forward and they looked at the effect of leg strength. And those that had bigger legs had bigger brains. So strengthen your legs. And leg strength is important for so many other reasons as well. One of the main reasons elderly end up in the hospital is falls. What stops falls? Better legs, stronger legs. One of the best reasons for sleep, quality sleep, is pain. What helps with pain? Muscle content. One of the strongest correlations with longevity, this is new, although it was done, but better studies recently. You know what determines longevity the most? People who have more muscle. I'm not talking about bodybuilding, but they maintain their muscle. People who lost muscle, they had the greatest, steepest decline. So maintain your muscle. And by the way, that doesn't mean eating a lot of meat. You can get protein from anything. Everything, plants, everything has protein. What I'm focusing on is the exercise part. Do the lifting. Do the working out. So that's leg strength, and strength is critical. And then the next thing is volunteering. Volunteering, we put it in there because otherwise you couldn't spell prevent. That's one. But the other reason is I actually love this concept. Because volunteering is not volunteering. Volunteering is connecting to people. And we are social beings. You're going to love me for this. Go to your churches. Be involved. Volunteer. It's good for your brain. He didn't pay me. It's critical. Communities that are connected. And so Seventh-day Adventists, Loma Linda, when they did the studies in all the faith communities, yes, the healthy part is important. But guess what's as important? The connected community. So those out there who are watching us on the internet, next time come here. You're going to love me for this. Come here, be social, connect. When we talk to people, there's a little bit of tension, that good stress. You have to listen, see if they like me. We do this math all the time. We do this psychology all the time. I get a sense, I get uncomfortable, I adjust, I talk, I think. That's a lot of mental activity. It's way more than Sudoku. That's what grows the brain. Volunteer, join, connect, socialize. I made a joke about volunteering, but to me, that's our entire life. Our kids' life is around volunteering. She knows. I mean, and it's actually selfish. If we want them to be empathic or have a purpose in life, depression, if you're not connected to something beyond yourself, I'm getting preachy here. The infinite abyss of self is dark. Only you get out of it when you connect to others. Volunteer, connect. And by the way, we're doing this selfishly. We love this. You think that we're doing this on our anniversary because, no, we absolutely love this. That's how we met. 8,000 miles away in Afghanistan. I was in Somalia, Afghanistan, and other places. And it's about a value of life, a quality of life, a meaningful life, a purposeful life. That's what drives mental activity, not the next TikTok. So the next one is exchange. This is important. Everybody talks about bad habits or bad stress, but there's a good stress. There's a reason you have 87 billion neurons, and if it was only about eating and reproducing, we'll leave it at that, you wouldn't need 87 billion neurons. There's evidence of it. Other animals. We have 87 billion neurons and 1 quadrillion connections because our brain demands thinking. Our brain demands volunteering. Our brain demands connecting. Our brain demands being challenged. And when it's not, here's the data. People who retire and then they say, oh, I'm going to just rest now, be on the beach. Guess who had the greatest decline? And those people. Because this brain that was active, all of a sudden is not doing as much. The brain tells itself, it doesn't tell us, it's a mechanism, it's genetic. It tells itself that, oh, I don't need all this energy. I don't need to spend 25% on this massive brain and all these connections. It withdraws and shrinks. That brain shrinks faster. So challenge your brain at least 2 to 3 hours a day. Push yourself, but don't force yourself. We say, don't retire, rewire. But even before that, challenge yourself around your passions. One of the first things we do is there's a purpose project. It's like finding your purpose is around your strengths, objective, what's needed out there, and connecting. There's a whole thing there. But finding purposes. I mean, one of my things is, of course, this is the central thing, the communities. We are approaching it completely different from any other organizations, and Susan will tell you this, that she was the CEO of Alzheimer's Association and others, and they were fantastic. But we're approaching it from the community side, from prevention side, which is the most important part. The other thing I'm doing is guitar. Now, Ayesha, cooking, scientist, probably, she's also an amazing singer, 4 octaves, I mean, crazy. I'm the worst guitar player in history, and I'm not joking. I've been playing guitar for 30 years. I say that, you know, when you play Stairway to Heaven, does anybody know that song? I'm still on 4th staircase. I just can't get it because I didn't start early enough. Ayesha started very, I'm attributing it to that, not talent, but it's more than that. But I like guitar. Yeah, the cacophony I create might give people dementia, but to me, it's growing my brain. I love projects. I'm involved in multiple projects. So those are the things that I've created that are passionate. Chess, Alex, our son and I, and actually now the whole family, all the time playing chess. Those are my passions. I'm trying to grow in that. So those are my purpose-driven activities that challenge my brain. And every day it's a little more, a little more, a little more. And of course, we're also taking some classes together, college classes together as a family. So that's the next level. So find your purposes, put yourself in it, and push yourself. That's critical. And that's good stress. Bad stress is the kind of stress that's not yours, not driven by your purpose. That's not just enough. Here's the second part. Doesn't have clear direction. It doesn't have to have perfect direction. My son asked me, she just graduated college, and he's like, Dad, I don't know what to do when I grow up. I'm like, I don't know what to do when I grow up. If I did, that means that I'm not doing the right thing. You should continually be changing, adapting to your strengths, to your community, to your, so keep pushing yourself. But if it's not clear at all, that creates a little tension. If it doesn't have clear timelines and victories, it creates tension. And if there's a lot of that in your life, that's profound tension. That's anxiety. That's an animal that's feeling like it's being attacked. The cortisol levels are up, not just for that run from that tiger, continuously. Inflammation is up. Now we have an entire society of continued higher baseline cortisol, inflammatory markers across the board. Imagine what that does in a month, 2 months, 3 months, years. It shrinks the brain. So what do you do with bad stress? Identify it clearly. On that white wall I was telling you about, we write, what is the stress? Then I say, oh, that's not clear enough. Let's break it down into parts. You know, in class I have some problems. What is the class problem? Oh, so we go, then reduce, eliminate, or delegate. And if you can't do that, if you don't have it written down, you have to identify it and write it down. For good stressors, increase them once you identify it specifically. For me, chess, guitar, this, that. Increase, empower, and tool. Find the tools for it. Yeah, so that's the good stress. Identify specific things, give the tools, empower them, move it forward, and that's it. That's the critical thing. We did a huge meta-analysis when we were at Cedars-Sinai about the brain health, and I'll get to good stress when we get to that. But that's literally the quality of life. And the things that you can't control is that mindset. See if that thing that you don't control can be connected to other things that have meaning. And you have positive language around it. And that's critical because stress creates chronic cortisol, elevated cortisol levels. Stress creates continued inflammatory markers. We know this. We have generational stress, we have community stress. We know certain communities have higher stress hormones. There's studies that show that they have higher stress hormones, which then affects their health, they affect their success, their anxiety, tension, everything across the board. So we have to address that as well. And that's our whiteboard right there, actually the wall that we do. Identify the stressors, reduce, delegate, or eliminate the bad stressors, increase, empower, provide tools for good stressors. Oh, okay.
All right, so about food. Now, food is very personal, and it's very misunderstood too. If you are on Instagram, TikTok, and the world of social media, you'll see a lot of talking heads talking about this food, this diet, that diet. So there's a lot of misunderstanding there, and I happen to be in the middle of it, which means that there is this big fight between people of what kind of diet is good or bad. So there is really no need for any argument because we have so much data and science behind the importance of nutrition for brain health and health in general. Now, why is food important? The same way that you don't want to be in a room, say for example, you don't want to be in a room full of smoke, right? That's not good for you. You're going to breathe it in, it's going to go inside your lungs, it's going to start damaging you. The same way that we don't want to live in an environment where there's a lot of toxic substances around us, right? I want all of us to think of food that way. What we put inside our body determines the internal environment that we create. And yes, our brain can be resilient. It doesn't necessarily have to see the manifestation of bad food right away. But imagine being exposed to this day after day after day after day, years, decades. Everything you put in your body 3-4 times a day determines what kind of brain cells you have, what kind of health you have. It can create stress, oxidative stress. It can create inflammation, and it can get rid of inflammation too. I don't want to say food is medicine, because medicine has its own place, right? But food can actually be quite healing. It can get rid of the things that start damaging the brain cells and the connections. And I think if we start looking at food that way, where it's nourishing, where we love the foods that love us back, where the relationship that we have with food is kind and compassionate rather than putting something that starts damaging us, I think that mindset and mind shift is very, very important. So what kind of foods are great for our brains? Foods that are colorful, foods that are whole, foods that are unprocessed, like fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds, good fats. These are very important. And whatever dietary pattern you look at, whether it's the Mediterranean diet, you guys have heard about the Mediterranean diet. So I'll talk about the Mediterranean diet a little bit because my research is on Mediterranean diet. It sounds Mediterranean, but it has nothing to do with the Mediterranean area. Yeah, we got a lot of information from them, but it's a dietary pattern and it's a scoring system. And over the years, scientists are not focusing on specific vitamins and foods. Remember, there was a time when people would say, you have to eat almonds to have good brain health, right? Or you have to eat blueberries to have good brain health. But we're shying away from that because we don't need one food. You could have a donut in the morning and then a salad for lunch. They're really going to cancel each other out, right? So it's the dietary pattern, the things that we choose to eat on a day-to-day basis that matters more. Now, this is the Mediterranean diet scoring system. You know, it has nothing to do with Mediterranean-ish style. You get high score when you eat vegetables, fruits, whole grains, nuts and seeds, legumes like beans, lentils, chickpeas. Mono and polyunsaturated fats, these are the good fats that come from things like vegetable oils, olive oil, avocado oil, and sources of omega-3 fatty acids. These are the most important fats for brain health. Where do they come from? Fish, seafood, chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp, nuts, all of those kind of things. And people get a low score when they eat red meat. Processed and red meat have been associated with damage to the body. And high-fat dairy products. There's a type of fat called saturated fats. Saturated fats and trans fatty acids. Trans fatty acids are, abnormally processed fats that are put in our foods that makes it safe on shelf for a long time. So those cookies that never go bad, that are always on the shelf for years? They don't even change color? It's just the same for years? Yeah, they have trans fats, and they are not good for our health. So saturated fats and meat. So this is basically what a Mediterranean diet looks like. And multiple different studies have been done on this dietary pattern, and it shows that when people eat these foods and they score higher on the Mediterranean diet construct, they do well. They have lower risk of Alzheimer's, lower risk of stroke.
I'm doing something that we never do, interrupt each other, but Ayesha won the American Heart Association Youngest Researcher Award for her work on Mediterranean diet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, honey. Thank you. And thank you, Dean. So they've studied it a lot, and I'm not going to bore you with all the details, although I would love to sit down and talk about nutrition again if you're interested. And it's essentially the small little changes that we make in our life, in our dietary patterns. What? Eating more whole grains. There is a war against bread. Everybody hates bread. There's nothing wrong with bread. Bread is amazing, right? Bread is incredible. I bake bread, but it's a type of flour we use. So if it's unrefined, if it's whole wheat, that's great for you. If it has seeds, that's amazing, right? So there's nothing wrong with whole grains, and I'll show you later. Eating dark leafy green vegetables, berries, nuts, beans, legumes daily, and reducing meat and choosing fish, say, for example, eating more plants, a plant-predominant diet, getting rid of trans fatty acids, which is very easy because if you cut down on fast food and processed foods, all of that is taken care of. Trying to eat foods that are one ingredient. An apple is a one ingredient, right? Beans are one ingredient. Lentils is one ingredient. But if you get a cookie or some sort of a processed food that's on a shelf, that has a lot of different things: sugar, salt, trans fatty acids, refined carbohydrates that could potentially be harmful for the brain. Now, there are a lot of studies. I promised myself I'm not going to bore anyone, but there's studies that show that when people adhere to the MIND diet, a type of a Mediterranean diet, they reduce their risk of Alzheimer's disease by 53%. What medicine does that? None, but diet does that. And even when people moderately adhere to it, they reduce their risk by 35%. That's the power of diet. Whole grains. So we'll walk out of here saying bread is not bad. Whole grain bread, when people ate whole grain bread, they reduced their risk of dementia by 34%. And they reduced their risk of Alzheimer's disease by 40%. So what is whole grain? These are whole grain breakfast cereals, dark bread, oatmeal, brown rice, added bran, added germ. Guess what grain didn't do well? Popcorn. Popcorn had nothing to do with brain health. Do you know why? Because we mess it up with butter and salt. Who eats popcorn without butter and salt, right? So if you cut down on that, or maybe add a little bit of seasoning instead of too much salt, it actually is really good for you. Same thing. People have this thing about gluten. Everybody's going gluten-free. Why? Yes, there is a set of population that needs to get off of gluten because they have celiac disease. Celiac disease is an inflammatory condition where people, even if they have gluten on a product on their skin, like in creams and in shampoo, they get inflammation. Their skin breaks down. It's a terrible condition, and they need to stay away from gluten. But guess what the percentage of those population are? It's only 1% of people in the United States. 1% of people have true gluten allergy. We don't need to go gluten-free. You see all these gluten-free cakes and cookies and everything else. What they do is they basically get rid of all of the phenomenal fiber, the bran, the germ in wheat from it. We don't need to go gluten-free. There's no evidence whatsoever that gluten is bad for brain health. Multiple studies. Nurses' Health Study, 13,000 women followed for almost 9 years. They showed that there was no association between gluten intake and cognitive scores, or brain test scores. What is the superstar? I know that I said there's no superfood, but if there's one food that's a superstar, it's green leafy vegetables. Multiple studies have shown that when people eat one serving of green leafy vegetables, which is about a fistful of either spinach, lettuce, kale, bok choy, you name it, collard greens, they were able to slow down their cognitive decline. And when people ate greens on a regular basis, listen to this, their brains were 11 years younger. Just a handful of greens every single day. We can do that, can't we? We can do that. Yes. So we're going to eat whole grain bread, and we're going to eat some spinach every day. If you can remember it after this talk, I think we've done a good job. Chicago Health and Aging Study again. Now this is about fat, consumption of fat, saturated fats. We gave some good news. Here's some of the things that you have to remember. There are certain things that you have to cut down on. Saturated fat is one of them. Whether it's stroke, Alzheimer's, other kinds of dementia, saturated fat increases the risk. And in multiple studies, they've shown that they have higher risk of Alzheimer's disease if they have higher saturated fats and trans fatty acids in their diet. This study looked at almost 10,000 people followed for 30 years. And if they had high cholesterol during their midlife, the LDL cholesterol that your doctor checks for you, if it's high, your risk of Alzheimer's disease is very, very high. In this population, they had a 57% higher risk of Alzheimer's disease if their LDL cholesterol was high. So you need to know what your LDL cholesterol is. All of us need to know it. Once we hit 30, I would say 25. After age 25, we all need to know every single year what our LDL cholesterol number is, and it needs to be under control. Unfortunately, there are doctors who will say, oh, don't worry about it, you're young, it's okay, no problem at all. No. You're going to stand up and say, no, I think I want it to be perfect. I don't want to lead a mediocre life. I don't deserve a mediocre LDL cholesterol. I want it to be perfect. And how do you make it perfect? You make it perfect with diet, cutting down on saturated fats, which are found in meat, high-fat dairy, cheese products, and processed foods. And in some people who have genetically high LDL, we need to speak with our doctors to see if medication is necessary. And there's nothing wrong with medication. But lowering that LDL cholesterol is very, very important. Adventist Health Study showed the same thing. People who consumed foods that are high in saturated fat had twice the risk of dementia compared to those who had lower saturated fats in their diet. And saturated fat usually comes in red meat. Women's health studies showed the same thing. Higher saturated fat, faster decline in cognition by 70%. Women with the lowest saturated fat intake had the brain function of someone 6 years younger. Can you believe that? It's a pattern, right? It's the same theme over and over again. Brain looks younger when you eat better. Brain looks older when you don't. What about supplements? We all see infomercial all the time. I'm not going to take names of the supplements, but there's so many commercials going like, oh yeah, if you take this supplement, you're going to do well. None of them are true. None of them. You don't have to pay subscription for getting vitamin concoctions. These are very important to check, and your doctors can do that if you have insurance. Get your vitamin B12 levels checked, get your vitamin D checked, get your folic acid checked. I want you guys to write this down. These are important. The rest are not. And you can get this over the counter if you want to, or by food. But beyond that, you don't need to buy any vitamin concoctions as well. There's no evidence that vitamin C, vitamin E, and other minerals are good for the brain. They're good for the brain if it comes in the form of food, but if you take it as a supplement, it doesn't do anything for you. So I would rather have you eat an apple and some almonds, maybe some walnuts, and maybe some whole grain bread to get your folic acid, rather than eat or pay extravagant amount of money for some vitamin concoctions. You don't need to. The most important type of fat for brain health is omega-3 fatty acids. These are very important, and your brain needs it on a daily basis. Dean and I have done multiple research on it, and it's needed especially in 2 stages of life. When you're a child, for children, when their brain is growing, and for people over the age of 65 who may start to have some memory problems, it's very important for them to take. Where does it come from? It comes from marine animals or plants. So from algae-based omega-3 fatty acids that are lower in mercury, lead, and also from fish as well. So to put everything together, to summarize, the dietary pattern that is good for brain health is essentially a plant-predominant diet, which means more vegetables, more fruits, more whole grains, more legumes, choosing good fats that are derived from plants like avocado oil, olive oil, vegetable oils, nuts, seeds, choosing plant proteins like legumes, nuts, cheese, chickpeas, lentils, choosing complex carbohydrates over simple carbohydrates. So for example, if you have a choice of eating white bread versus whole wheat bread, choose whole wheat bread. That's actually good for you. And then focusing on increasing fiber. Fiber comes from fruits and vegetables and legumes. And that's it. And then the last section is training your brain. Dean talked about the concept of volunteering, the concept of making sure that we're connected. I wanted to kind of tell you guys 2 very quick studies. One of them was the London taxi driver and the bus driver study. In London, they wanted to check 2 groups of people, bus drivers and taxi drivers. Why taxi drivers? Has anybody been to London? So London is a very confusing city. It's not like Chicago or New York where you have, numbered streets. And people have to go and take a very difficult exam called the knowledge. How intimidating is that for an exam to be called the knowledge, right? So they train for that test for a couple of years, and it's a very hard exam. The bus drivers don't have to. The bus drivers have their route, and they don't have to memorize anything. So the scientists thought that, hey, it would be really cool to look at their brains, look at the brains of taxi drivers and bus drivers and see if there's any difference, because the taxi drivers have to go through so much learning and training. And guess what they did? They looked at their brains, and the taxi drivers actually had bigger brains. And this was a test that they took in their 50s. They weren't in their 20s or 30s. Even at age 50, 60, 70, our brain continues to grow if we train it. So take a class, come to church, volunteer, speak with each other. It's important for your brain. It'll grow your brain, and it will prevent dementia and other brain diseases. The nun study was the same thing. 2 groups of nuns were tested. One of them had, they basically were tested throughout their life. They donated their bodies to science, their diaries, their vocabulary, all of their life patterns were studied. The scientists noticed 2 patterns. They noticed that the brains of one group were just completely riddled with Alzheimer's pathology. It had all the bad proteins when they did autopsies on them. But in life, they never manifested any disease. They were fine. They never had any memory problems. And then they looked at another group of the nuns, and their brains looked okay. It did not have the pathologies of Alzheimer's disease. But in life, they had Alzheimer's. They had memory problems. And the scientists were like, what is going on here? Why is it that we're seeing this discrepancy? So they went and they read their diaries. The women that had the pathology of Alzheimer's disease yet did not have any symptoms in life, they had better vocabulary. They were more active. They were outgoing. They were engaged. They were serving. They had more friends. They talked more. The women who unfortunately had okay-looking brains but never had symptoms of Alzheimer's during life, they were introverts. They developed Alzheimer's. They were introverted. They never connected. They stayed very comfortable in their place, and they were engaged. They didn't really write much. They didn't engage much. So I think this was actually a really good book too, Aging with Grace. If anybody's interested, it's a really good book, Aging with Grace. Beautiful study of how important it is for us to be engaged, being connected. All right, and so that it comes down to this diagram.
Yes. So our study, our meta-analysis, and our work is about how do you create good stress? Because it's also about purpose. It's also about meaning. And what we found in our meta-analysis was that there are 3 variables that you have to focus on to grow the brain at any age. And it's purpose, find purpose. I mean, I'm repeating that. How you define it doesn't have to be something like I'm going to save the Amazon rainforest, which would be great, but it could be something as simple as I'm going to learn guitar. I'm going to, create a group. I'm going to have a book club. I'm going to, simple things. Find purpose or purposes. Make it complex. It's great. Sudoku is great. I hate Sudoku, but that's a personal thing. But it's not playing guitar. When you're playing guitar, you're reading the notes. That's your language centers. You broke as a word and keeps being affected. You're processing it visually. It's your occipital lobe. You're processing it through thought. It's your frontal lobe. You're being creative. It's your right parietal lobe. You're being dexterous. It's your motor cortex. You're trying to keep your fingers together, some of us, and it's your cerebellum. You're emotionally involved. If you're playing, good, but for those listening, bad. But at least that's your limbic system. That's not Sudoku. That's your brain on fire. That's your entire brain being challenged. That's true for learning how to dance. That's true for volunteering. That's true for community. That's true for book club. That's true for all these activities that is a complexity to it. There's a human component to it. That's more engaging of all of the brain, and that grows all of the brain. That's complexity. And the third component was challenge. Keep pushing yourself. If you learn the song, let's say some Beatles song, it's 4 chords. Almost all Beatles are 4 chords. All of the, look at me showing off. It's basically 4 chords. Do a song that's got 5 chords. Do another one. So I'm using that as an example. If you learn to do a jig, a dance, that's got 3 steps, do another one that's got 5 steps. If you're volunteering and your job is becoming repetitive, do something that pushes you, challenges you, makes you a little uncomfortable. I call leadership comfort with discomfort, but it's not just leadership. Humanity's growth is about discomfort, pushing yourself, learning more, challenging yourself with social activity, human activity. That's what grows the brain. Purpose, complexity, challenge. So examples, as I said, learning a musical instrument, new languages, not just learn new languages, try it out in public. Ayesha knows, we just came from a couple of places, and I'm terrible in the taxi or Uber. I talk with everybody, and I destroy the languages. But challenge yourself by using the language that you learn. Taking classes, leading passion projects, playing games that challenge the brain. In conclusion, it's never too early and it's never too late. Comprehensive, real activities are great. They're great for your brain. That's how your brain works. And lifestyle is best only if, lifestyle is the most powerful thing you have. And lifestyle is easy. There's no failure. If you can measure it, you can change it. If I'm going to start with a diet, I'm going to go into that. Let's just take diet. It's not about, oh, I'm going to go whole food, plant-based. Absolutely. In fact, we demand you don't do that. Go one step. Find one thing you're going to increase, one thing you're going to decrease. I'm going to increase the greens measurably, meaningfully, and over time. By the way, no habit changes in 21 days. That's another social media thing. Depends on the habit. If you're trying to give up sugar, I can assure you, you're not going to develop the habit in 21 days. It's going to take longer. So take one thing, increase that until you master it. Reduce one thing. Learn where you're getting sugar in your diet. Not just added sugar, but food that has sugar. And increase that by 50%, measurably. When you do it measurably, you can have control over it. So that's it. Once you master these two things, go to the second thing. Keep this. Now you own this. Now I'm eating, then go to the next habit and the next habit. Small steps. Bring it into your family into small steps. And that's where our whole approach is. So our approach is community-based because that's where healthcare takes place. In the hospital, it's sick care. Needed, extremely important. I had back surgery when I was young, indiscretions of youth. I had a syndrome, too small, too slow, and too dumb to know it, and played football, and broke my back. Needed that. They cured me like this. I haven't had a problem since. Sick care is needed, but health care, which is 80%, happens here. Literally in the churches and faith communities. And all faith communities, that's where it happens. And it happens in conversations, in empowerment, getting rid of words like moderation, because it's the word that's there to get you out of doing good things. Oh, it's all about moderation. No, getting rid of words like motivation and perfection. It's not. It's about steps, measurable steps that you can change. And it happens in the community. That's how it happens. And we have to measure it. And that's what we're hoping to do in this community. So the partnership here is not us. Yeah, we're giving some fancy talks, but it's about you, the nurses, the communities, the Rons, the Angies, the pastor, all of you, leading together to bring this language of change. 10%, 10%. 10% is 10% less dementia, 10% less stroke. That's thousands of people. And significantly more vascular dementia that nobody scores because you don't see the slowing of cognition over years, but now you'll see the opposite. And that happens in the communities. And that's our entire life's mission, is just that. This community and many other communities. And the community has to own it at the end so that we are no longer needed. And hopefully that's quicker because then you own it. If the people themselves own it, then it becomes a culture. It's not imposed. It's not a diet that needs a name. It's not a lifestyle that needs a name. It doesn't need a name. It's my lifestyle. And that, by the way, that's part of change, which is identity change. That I'm going to exercise. No, I'm an exerciser. I'm a healthy eater. We're a healthy community. We're a healthy community-centered population. That's the critical factor. So we're more than privileged. Here's me getting emotional. On this 19th anniversary, for us to be here and engaging and being welcome to this community so we can make a difference, hopefully, and together we can make a difference. So thank you so much.
Thank you all. We can do a question and answer session if you'd like. Oh, okay. Sorry.
Oh, Susan. Okay. So one other thing that I wanted to say was in our partnership in our board and in this endeavor is Susan Galea is a friend, a long-term friend. When I was at Cedars, actually even before then, we knew Susan, who was the CEO of Alzheimer's Association Greater LA. She's one of the most powerful, genuine, caring. Those are important words. They were not just haphazard. Powerful, meaningful words for us. And friend for life. She's in this. She's passionate about this. So we welcome her so much.
Welcome, Susan. Thank you for being here with us.
We're going to probably another 15 minutes. I should just keep an eye on me, and I'll let you know when that 15 minutes is up, because we do have questions and answers. Those of you who have written questions on a sheet of paper that you were given, if you would pass them over to the ushers, we will gladly take it from there, and I'll come up to the podium.
Thank you so much. So that I can continue until the questions come.
Yes.
We've already had one event, a remarkable event, a few months ago in February, I believe, where at the gym we had, actually, I thought it was significantly more than 600 people that came, and we gave away blood pressure machines, and we had conversations, and we had talk about the different elements, food, sample foods. Michael and his amazing cooking, sorry? Guacamole and others as well. And that's just the beginning of this conversation. We have some chefs from the community that are going to create healthy food examples, because our idea is not that you're supposed to eat Mediterranean. I don't even know what Mediterranean is. What does Mediterranean-like food look in this community? It has to be from this community and from our community here. I shouldn't say this, from our community, and what it means to us. Exercise shouldn't be some contrived activity that doesn't mean anything to me. I mean, I love Pilates, but I don't know, actually I don't know what Pilates is, but it has to mean something. The brisk walking, maybe starting groups that are brisk walking. And then the leadership, we already had so much leadership, Ron and everybody else, so that's where it has already started, actually.
Gentlemen, may I have these questions now? Thank you. Or are you just now writing them? These should have been passed out in the beginning. Thank you, sir. And I should have said, make sure you do not write them in tongues. So I am waiting for Holy Spirit's interpretation. Want to clarify, there is a gene for Alzheimer's disease, and if you can test it, if you are prone to getting Alzheimer's disease. You got that, right?
Yes, so should we get tested for the genes that we just mentioned? There are some tests that you have to pay out of pocket to get tested, whether you have the gene or not, but we don't recommend it. Why? What are you going to do? Increase stress? Stress about it? So it's best to just live with the understanding that, yeah, we may have the genes. I know I probably have the genes with, 3 grandparents going through it. I think I do have it. And what I do is I just tell myself, yeah, I probably have the genes. I'm just going to do my best to stay away from it and prevent it. So yeah, I mean, for more information, if you want to know about it, what kind of genetics pattern you carry, yes, you can definitely do that. But in my experience of working with patients, it just creates a lot of anxiety, because how many of us forget our keys? We forget our keys, my purse, my bag, my books here and there. And every time I forget something, I'm like, oh, I have the genes, right? So it's not very helpful at all.
Thank you. Our next question, minus beef, what meats do you recommend? I am allergic to fish.
Oh,
Yeah.
you want to say? So, so for those who are allergic to seafood and fish, I think you can definitely cut down on whatever animal protein you're consuming, and also consider eating more plant proteins, beans, lentils, chickpeas. People always say that, protein is a big problem. It's not. If you're eating a variety of different plant-based foods, you actually get enough protein. And nowadays, there are so many other ways of including healthy protein in your diet too. Tofu, tempeh, some other plant-based proteins are excellent. Yeah. They're packed with fiber, they're packed with micronutrients, so that's also a great way to do it.
And as a step, So just for transparency, we're plant-based, 100% plant-based, but we never push this on others
Yeah.
because there are many reasons for that. We say go healthier. That's critical, and there are steps. Beef jerky, which I grew up on in Pittsburgh, definitely not. Yeah, once in a while here and there, but not very rarely, because that's like poison. I can't believe how many, I would play tennis and then it would be like beef. It's just crazy. Then it's red meat, then it's other meats, turkey, chicken. Fish is actually so very transparent. Fish is good, not all fish. Tuna, there's no clean tuna. There is no source of clean tuna anymore, none. But mackerel, salmon, it's a smash.
The smaller fish,
The
yeah.
smaller fish, yes. But don't fry it, bake it. That's it. Now, it's also a great source of omega-3. But if you want to go even further, avoid meat altogether and get protein. There's lots of proteins. So there's not an all or none.
Yeah.
But the key is that when you're stepping in one level, make sure you measure your change. So you don't keep sliding back and forth, and creates a disempowerment. So if you're going to go from red meat to chicken, then you're saying that this is my habit and maintain it. That gives you a sense of accomplishment, habit creation, things of that nature. That's the more important thing. Does that make sense?
Cheryl? Thank you. What do you suggest for people who have a hard time sleeping when you have tried everything and you are a senior? Good question.
That's a great question. So changing your sleep habit is probably one of the most important and most difficult thing to do, because there's so many different factors, right? And all of those factors need to be found out. Now, I don't know this lovely person, but if they've done everything and they're still having problems, I think that's a good time to talk to a sleep specialist. And there are sleep medicine doctors that check different things. They check your breathing patterns. You go through a sleep study. They check your muscles. They check your hormone levels. They check all of the different factors in your body that could affect your sleep patterns. And I think it's important to kind of really do a deep dive and investigate as to what the factors are that are causing bad sleep.
One factor is sleep apnea, which is actually much more common than people know. Increases your chance of dementia by 70%. Untreated sleep apnea, untreated. Now, there are many reasons for sleep apnea. One is obesity, the other is just central sleep apnea, although that's 15% or so. But other is redundant tissue. All of these are treatable. Yet, in majority of communities, especially African-American communities, especially other communities, it's not even investigated.
Right.
It's something that's treatable, and 70% dementia risk. But here's the thing, with sleep apnea, the percentage of cognitive decline is even higher. So a lot of population walk around with sleep apnea and their cognitive state is much lower than it could have been. Not dementia, but it's never treated and addressed. So that's another thing. If you're snoring a lot, if you're moving during the night, here's a big one. Your amount of good sleep is 7 to 8 hours, but if you're sleeping 8 hours and yet you're still tired during the day, something is going on. Or if you need 9 hours of sleep, studies have shown people who need 9 hours or more, it's because their body needs it because they're not getting good sleep during those 8 hours. So that's when to get investigation going. Yeah.
I think this is a good question to follow up with what you just said. The question says, how is the R in prevent? How does taking a nap assist with helping brain refresh or reset?
That's a great question. So there's a general answer and there's a specific answer. The general answer is we shouldn't need naps. If you're needing a nap, it means you're either very, very tired, you're pushing yourself too much, or you didn't get a good night's sleep. That 7 to 8 hours of sleep should be deep enough for you to be able to function throughout the day without the need for a nap. Now, there are people who actually are very, very hardworking, and they get fatigued and exhausted, and they may benefit from a 20-minute nap. Anything more than 20 minutes can actually be detrimental for the brain. Any nap after 3 p.m. can be detrimental to the brain. Is that bad news? All right. Sounds like bad news.
Somebody's laughing with it for a reason.
And
If
the
a
reason
nap
is,
isn't an hour or two, forget it.
yeah. So after 3 p.m., it resets your clock.
Yeah.
It actually resets your biological clock where your brain doesn't know what time you have to go to bed, because we're biological beings. We kind of get up with the sun and go to bed with the sun. That's how it used to be for a long, long time. And so our bodies are used to patterns. We're pattern recognizers. And anything that breaks that pattern can't be good for you. I hope that makes sense.
But absolutely it does. But a nap also interrupts your sleep. It can interrupt your sleep by hours. But like I said, with me, if my nap is not an hour or two, forget it. It's not
Yeah.
worth it. This cat nap stuff doesn't work here.
Yeah. I guess there's evidence only for catnap, not the longer ones.
Can I get an amen?
Amen.
What is a healthy cholesterol number?
That's a really good question. Should I take it? All right, so I kept on harping on the LDL cholesterol because I'm a physician. I work in the emergency room and I see patients coming in with strokes and other brain diseases. The normal number for that LDL cholesterol that I want you all to remember is 70, 70.
Please write that down. This
Yeah.
is actually, like, it's one of those numbers right now that's very important
Right.
for
Yeah.
your health.
70 is a normal number. Whether you're 9 or 99, 70 is a normal number. If you are saying you're, in your 40s and your cholesterol is in the 115s, 120s, 130s, that LDL cholesterol, and your doctor says don't worry about it, you need to tell them that they should worry about it.
And-
Sorry about that. No, I was going to say the foundation, if you think about it, the foundation of disease is laid 20 to 30 years before the first manifestation of that disease. All right? So say, for example, if I am a 75-year-old person and I am seeing the beginnings of memory disorders, or if my walking is changing, or if I'm not remembering things, it didn't happen then. It happened when I was in my 40s. It started happening when I was in my 30s. And that's why it's so important for all of you to inform the younger generation that we're not fear-mongering anything, but they really need to start taking care of themselves because the foundation is laid very, very early. And LDL cholesterol is one of the pivotal things in building that foundation for disease later on in life. We need to make sure that LDL is 70 and lower at whatever stage we're in.
Can I give them three sets of numbers? Hemoglobin A1C is important for your glucose. It's a 3-month monitor. If it's below 5.5, it's great. Okay? LDL 70, and blood pressure 120 over 80, 120 over 70 or 80. Those numbers are your markers that you should know. B12 above 250. Actually, we say more in the 500
Vitamin
range.
B12, yes.
Vitamin B12 in the 500 range and above. And vitamin D, check that as well. That's a little more personal because you can get toxic in vitamin D, so vitamin D, check it with your doctor as well. Those are critical, like 5 things that can change an entire community right there.
Some doctors are saying that the new norm when it comes to blood pressure is the mid-130s and the high 80s. What is your comment on that? Because we as seniors are confessing 120 over 80.
Right. So again, it depends. So for example, if you've lived with high blood pressure for all your life and you go to the doctor, they can't reduce it right away. And it becomes very personalized at that point. But for people who don't have blood pressure or they just found out that they have blood pressure, it's very important for them to keep it at 120 over 80. Anything beyond 125 is considered hypertension or high blood pressure. Right? But for people who are over the age of 65 and in their 70s, that's very personalized. Why? Because when people have high blood pressure for a very long time, the arteries in their body, and especially in their brain, they harden up. See, our arteries are very nice and elastic, and they allow blood to kind of expand these arteries. But if we have high blood pressure for a very long time, these arteries harden up. And lowering it sometimes doesn't allow enough blood to go to our brain. So people get very confused when their blood pressure is lowered very quickly. So after age 65 in their 70s, they need to speak with their doctor to find out what best blood pressure they should have. But for the rest of the population, it's 120 over 80.
One other thing is have a blood pressure device at home.
Oh, everybody should have it.
And record your morning blood pressure right before breakfast, right when you get up, because that's where your cortisol is the highest. Remember that The highest number of heart attacks and strokes are early morning because the melatonin goes down and cortisol goes up, so it stresses your system. It's a natural stress test. Get your blood pressure before breakfast and record that. Take 3 of those. That's an incredible marker of your health, taking it to your doctor. Now, here's the thing. If your doctor is not responsive to the things we're saying, push them a little. Certain communities are not used to pushing the doctors politely, nicely.
Yeah.
If the doctor is not responsive and all they're doing is fire the doctor.
Yeah. They are there to serve you. They are there to serve you. And so you need to be an advocate for your health and push them.
Alzheimer's Solution definitely addresses that, and it's all about exercise and diet. It's just that simple. Yeah, and so Alzheimer's Solution, I'll touch upon your book before you leave, because it was an incredible read. It was a challenging read because it's so medical with the information, like Behind the Scene with Dr. Price here, an incredible book, but you better be prepared, okay? It's almost like working for a grade, but it's an awesome book, both of these are. Did you say, well, let me get to this one first. What role does the HDL play in our overall brain health?
That's a really good question. I love these technical questions. I left them out because I didn't want to bore anyone. So there are multiple different types of cholesterol, right? You have your total cholesterol, you have your LDL cholesterol, and you have your HDL cholesterol. For a long time, people thought that if your HDL is high, you're protected. But the latest data shows that it's not important. Your LDL goes up and down with your HDL. So the most important thing to remember is your LDL number. Whether your HDL is high or not, it doesn't play a role in your brain health. And we're now finding out that it doesn't really mean much for your heart health either. Say, for example, your LDL is 135, but your HDL is high too. Meaningless. You need to bring down that LDL. Is your HDL going to come down with it as well? Yeah, because they work together. So the most important number to change is LDL, and don't worry about your HDL at all.
Very good. This is our last question. I'll go with the flow because we're beyond our time. Go with the flow? The Spirit is moving. Thank you. It's not our last question. This is the question for right now. Did you say forgetfulness is under the dementia umbrella?
No. So dementia is, by that simple definition of dementia, is where memory and cognition is affected enough where you can't do one of your daily activities, like driving. Not driving because you can't see, driving because your thinking process has been affected, where you're making some mistakes, some beginning mistakes, where you can't do your finances, where you can't answer the phone, you can't take care of your medications. So when that happens, what we call them instrumental activities of daily living, when that happens, that's a rough definition of dementia. There's more technical, but that's it. Forgetfulness could be just early stages, pre-dementia, or it could be, but one of the more common things, I don't want to let us out and say, oh, this is what it is, but for a lot of people, it's anxiety. It's depression. It's stress. The gatekeeper to your consciousness is focus. The doorway you walk through to become conscious. This whole thing with AI, it's a conversation in our household with my kids. Both of them are into AI. The moment you become conscious, it's not always. You come to the surface with pain, with suffering, with alertness, all this. The thing that gets you to that point opens the door for you as focus. If focus is affected, memory, executive function, processing speed, everything's affected. So focus is critical. Now, focus is affected by many things. Pain, people who have chronic pain. Pain medication, other medications, lack of sleep, stress, anxiety, depression. Lots of things can affect focus. Now, I don't want us to just say, oh, then it's that. Because take the worst case scenario and say, okay, this is something that I should worry about, and start doing the things necessary to change. Because guess what also changes? Anxiety, depression, pain, all is exercise, nutrition, all those things as well. But so sometimes forgetfulness could be just one of those other things, which is anxiety and stress and there's the time in your life where you're having a lot of difficulties. It could be just that.
Is canned tuna a healthy fish to eat?
So canned tunas have been studied, and excuse me, unfortunately, our oceans are not as clean as they used to be. Our oceans are used as a garbage dump. And the only heavy metals, because there's a lot of heavy metals and other chemicals, close to 4,000 of them, that are being dumped in the oceans every single year, and the fish are dying. But we only check two. We check mercury and lead, and we don't check it all the time. So the assumption is all of these large animals, especially large fish, there's a concept of biofiltration, which means that whatever chemicals are put in the water and they live in it, they concentrate that in their flesh. And when we consume that, they've done studies where they see that mercury level was 0, and then people had tuna and their mercury levels just shot up. That can't be good. That can't be good for the brain, because mercury is toxic and lead is toxic. Now, we don't have large population studies to show us that people who eat canned tuna are actually unhealthy, but they're coming. There are studies that are being done. And so the theory is stick to smaller fish, right? Because they don't concentrate all these heavy metals as much as the bigger fish do. So instead of eating tuna, choose salmon, choose mackerel, choose the smaller ones like anchovies, choose sardines, choose herring, things of that nature. So the acronym for the smaller fish are SMASH: salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. Those are healthier, those are lower in mercury and lead compared to tuna, which has a lot of mercury.
Adding to what you just answered, how does food dye affect the life of salmon and add color to farm-raised fish?
I am not an expert in that field, and I won't be able to answer that question.
Okay, I appreciate that honesty. I think color adds to anything. When it comes to food, we should leave it alone, period.
Yes.
That's just my opinion.
No, I
We have a lot of colorful foods. We should just stick to them.
Nah.
But
natural
not to be
colors.
added. We're talking natural color.
Yes.
Amen. Can you talk briefly about processed meats? What are they? This question is really answered in your book, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What's the difference between steak, chicken, and sausage, bologna, as well as hot dogs? And why is cheese bad?
All right.
And what is real cheese and what is processed cheese?
That's
You got all that?
That's a good question, yeah. So I'm going to talk specifically about processed meats. So processed meats, these are meats that go through certain processes of adding nitrates to them and other preservatives so that they could, stay that way longer. It's actually just a process of preservation of meat that makes them, sausages or bacon and things of that nature. And the addition of all of those chemicals make them unhealthy. As a matter of fact, processed meat is actually a cancer-inducing compound. In the American Cancer Society's website, they always post a list of compounds that that potentially increase your risk for cancer. There's plutonium. There's another chemical that I'm forgetting right now, and then there's processed meat right next to plutonium, right? And then there's smoking and things of that nature. So it comes under that realm. So we can't really call processed meats healthy at all. Red meat and unprocessed meat are definitely healthier than processed meats. Chicken is definitely healthier than red meat. Fish is definitely healthier than chicken. Mm-hmm. Legumes and fish are probably around the same category. So even in fish, like we said, bigger fish are unhealthier than smaller fish. So it's not evil and good food, it's like a spectrum. And you choose where you want to live. You want to live on the dangerous green zone, the red zone where the processed foods are, or do you want to kind of stay where the fish and the legumes and the plants are? It's a choice.
Dr. Dean?
Yeah, this is beautiful. No, she said everything. But one other thing that I always, there's a lot of things with meat as well, especially saturated fat. Saturated fat, the main source of saturated fat is meats, especially red meats and things. And then besides that, there's glycosylation, how meat actually genetically alters the genetic process. And multiple, when people listen to us, we talk about all these processes of how it actually damages our genes and other mechanisms as well. But as Ayesha said, your journey should not be an all or none. It should be graded stepwise and where you're comfortable landing healthier. That's the critical thing.
I forgot to answer the cheese question.
Oh,
So
okay.
the cheese is also, high-fat cheeses are unhealthy because of their saturated fat content. So, if anybody has to choose, if they want to still consume cheese, mozzarella cheese has less saturated fats than, say, for example, hard cheeses like cheddar cheeses. Cottage cheese has less saturated fats than mozzarella. And now there are actually a lot of wonderful plant-based cheeses that we're going to experience, hopefully sometime soon. Cashew cheeses and nut cheeses that have polyunsaturated fats that are actually good for you. So I'm glad that we're kind of in a stage where we have options.
Sure. I'm not sure if what I'm about to say can be Googled or you may find it on YouTube, but if you were to see the making of hot dogs, you would never eat them again in
That's
life.
true.
Yes.
That is true.
You would never eat them again in life. I'm just saying. Let's expand upon, if you can, why omega-3 fatty acids should be eaten early as well as later in life.
So we just did 2 studies, comprehensive studies, which are pretty difficult, and we were asked to do it. We're kind of proud that we're at a stage where people ask us to do comprehensive reviews for American College of Lifestyle Medicine. And we're very proud that in one of them, the lead was our daughter, Sophia, and the other one was Alex. They're at that stage now. And what we found was that for early stage, the brain is incredibly hungry. When you hear on TV or other places where brain is made of fat, therefore it needs fat, it's completely wrong. They don't even know what they're talking about. Yes, it has a lot of fat, but what kind of fat? DHA. 50% of brain is DHA. The only fat that it needs is that. The rest it produces itself more than enough. It has no problem. It's omega-3 fatty acid, which is needed. And they've shown that children that don't have enough omega-3, in our paper, actually it's a review of all the literature basically, the ones that had lower omega-3 levels had depression, anxiety, attention deficit, and cognitive decline, and all of those things. And the ones that had higher levels, even by oral intake, by vitamins or supplements, they had better state. Now, the data was not perfect, and that's the beauty of science. It's not perfect, but the data was pretty strong in that direction. The other population was later in life. People who were pre-dementia actually responded very well to omega-3. But the reason we think that it's just those two and not the middle is because the middle is got so much resilience that you can't detect a change. So we, for transparency's sake, we don't even tell you what we're going to take because that's going to be marketing, so we're not going to. But we take algae-based omega-3, both of us. But because we think that that need for omega-3 is needed even in the middle. But we just can't, we don't have the tool to detect the difference because the scaffolding is so good that from outside, you can't measure it yet. But I think you're still damaging or building scaffolding with omega-3. So either eat fish, the smaller fish, eat chia, flaxseed, walnuts, things of that nature, or take supplements just to make sure. That's up to you. Yeah.
Is collagen protein a good thing?
No. There's no evidence for it. I'm sorry. I
Is
didn't want to be that
collagen
blunt.
protein a good thing? And that was an emphatic answer.
So proteins are important.
Right.
Proteins are important because they help build muscle, it repairs the body. Source of protein is more important than protein in general. Where you get your protein is important, right? Because protein can come from red meat too, but it comes with a lot of other things that are not healthy for you. Collagen protein is a fad because when you eat collagen, you essentially just break it down and it doesn't do the thing that it's supposed to do. Collagen might be good for the skin. There are some studies that show that, there are some serums and things for skin that collagen might actually be helpful, but once you eat it, it gets degraded. But it's still being advertised as something really healthy and people still buy it, but there's no evidence for it at all.
Dr. Dean?
Yeah, along that line, when people tell you things like alkaline water.
Oh, that's another fad.
So it's like not even scientific because the pH of your stomach is nearly 2.
It's very acidic.
It doesn't matter what kind of water alkaline you eat, it always equalizes it. I mean, this is like level 1 science. Or if they say collagen so it can get to your joints, look what happens to that collagen protein. It goes to the acid level 2, gets broken into amino acids, actually even beyond that. So it's gone. The collagen part is gone. It's just amino acid. Now, by the time it gets absorbed into the skin, it's not going to reconfigure into collagen. So it doesn't make sense at all. Yeah.
Pastor, you have a comment. Would you like to make it publicly? Please, sir. Because you're laughing, and I've laughed, and I've been truthful, so spit it out.
No, the alkaline comment, that was a gut punch. That's all. But good to know.
Yeah.
We've been getting a lot of gut punches today, okay?
No, it's not a gut punch. It's a community building together. It's learning. We were invited to this cruise to give talks, which was great. I hate cruises, but I went anyway. No,
I thought you were my friend.
No, I feel claustrophobic. I feel like this
Okay.
little space. I've told you this, yeah. And we learned quite a few new things, but this concept makes sense because one of the scientists that actually does the work on GI system was sometimes it's obvious after the fact, so don't feel bad because we just learned this thing because it was just so obvious to us. He's like, do you know that it gets degraded? I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Why didn't I think about that? It was for us. It was also that the way it was approached was obvious. That's it.
Our body monitors our pH level so tightly
Yeah.
that if it goes 2 point up and 2 point down, we actually become unconscious and we need to go to the hospital. So our body actually has a very, very tight control of our pH, and water doesn't change it.
Well, with me, after buying a very expensive machine and drinking this water for months, it dehydrated me. Yeah, it dehydrated me, and I'm a water drinker. But this pH, whatever, with this machine dehydrated me.
But speaking to that, we go to these fancy places. We're not going to name. They ask us to come give talks, and it's incredible. People are wearing gowns, and then in the morning they're doing all kinds of stuff that I don't know. But nonetheless, we'll stick to the subject matter. And then after all that's done, they talk about cleanses, all these things that they put at the bottom of their feet and all cleanses. There are only 2 cleanses. You know what those 2 cleanses are? And they're powerful cleanses. Like, there doesn't get more powerful than that. You want to know? Come next time. No, I'm just kidding. No, there are 2 cleanses. I'm just kidding. 2 cleanses. Water and sleep. And the cleansing power of sleep, we cannot overstate it. We can't. So go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time. That's a pattern recognizer. That's actually the number one thing that sets your system into place. Work on that sleep in small increments. You're not failing, you're building. So that's it. Take away the word failure out of it. And water, at least 8 cups. Yeah, some study's gonna come, it's gonna say 9. The other one's gonna say 6. I don't care about those little movements and what it did to the mice, and they drowned it. In humans, at least 8 cups of water. And it's incredibly cleansing, because your body actually has less and less water as you grow older. About 75% of your body is water. As you grow older, it gets lower and lower to 60. When people drink water, they actually replenish the cells, they replenish the system. They replenish the milieu of the body that actually exchanges chemicals, that cleanses the brain. In sleep, another thing happens, amazing. Actually, the brain shrinks during sleep. You know why? It creates space for that fluid to cleanse the brain. And what do you need for that? Water. So drink a lot of, you know what's the best, healthiest drink? The super drink. We're giving you some really amazing superfoods. Not very interesting, but your superfood is, let's see how many people listen. There was one superfood, if there is a superfood, what is it? Dark leafy greens. What's your super drink? Water. You did all this and brought us here for greens and water? Really? Yeah, so.
No, put the mic back to your mouth since we're on water. Do you prefer spring over purified?
I like running. And clean.
He's not gonna touch that one, okay?
Doesn't
Do you
matter.
prefer room temperature or cold?
Oh, prefer? Oh,
Yeah.
what? Cold.
Yeah, cold.
Yeah.
Because my wife will tell you, if it's not cold, I'm not drinking it. Maybe I'm on a desert and I gotta have water, I might do it.
Yeah.
But it's gotta be cold for me.
Speaking to that,
Yes.
I don't want this community or any community to feel left out. The Joe Rogans of the world are talking about saunas and ice baths. Such a popular thing.
That's cruelty.
Study came that showed that it increased this and increased. Overstated. Don't worry, you're not missing anything. Take a cold shower, that's good enough. You don't need if you listen to them, you think that you need one of those ice baths in your backyard and you need a sauna. Because in Norway, they did something. They don't take into consideration that Norway is very different in general. So there's a lot going on out there that means nothing. Greens and water, that's a good start. And a morning walk, morning brisk walk.
Is it best to buy only organic greens to avoid pesticides?
That's a really good question. Should we all be eating organic foods? So over the years, because of industrialization and because of producing more food, we've needed some chemicals, we've needed some modification to produce more food. But I think the harm of the pesticides is a bit exaggerated. It's not as bad, because when you look at all of these studies that I showed on the slide, the decadal studies from different populations, they all ate unorganic foods. They didn't really go out and paid like 3 or 4 times more to buy organic foods to stay healthier and have lower risk of stroke and dementia. So what we say is, the data is not there. Yes, if you can afford it, eat organic vegetables and foods because they have less pesticides in them. But if you can't afford it, it doesn't mean you shouldn't eat vegetables. Just focus on eating vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and not processed foods. So the organic shouldn't be the determinant factor of what kind of foods we eat. Eat plants, eat lots of it. If you can afford it, good, go for organic.
Can you also get your daily intake of greens through smoothies and juicing? I'm going to say yes, and you can take it from there because I follow some recipes in your book.
Absolutely, yeah. One of the best ways to introduce greens is in smoothies, because you can put a lot of them and it's like a nice drink, and you can sweeten it with bananas, mangoes, whatever fruit you want, and you can consume it. That's how I fooled my kids when they were young. You just put it in a smoothie.
Because I eat salads on the regular, okay, and there's always beans in my house. My wife is good cooking them fresh, pintos, black-eyed peas, and you had up there we should eat beans every day. I said, okay, well, she got an advance notice on that one.
Beans are honestly, the humble beans and the humble lentils are one of the most powerful foods that are completely ignored. One determinant factor of people living a long life, whether it's in Loma Linda, Okinawa, Japan, Sardinia, Italy, the longest living populations around the world, they all eat beans. That's like the core of their dietary patterns. And why is it healthy? It has protein, it has fiber, it has minerals, it has vitamins. It satiates you. There are studies that show that when people have a bean burrito, of course without the other junk in the burrito, if they have a bean burrito, the beans in that burrito was able to regulate their sugar level if they ate a cookie or a donut later that day. It actually kept the sugar levels in the gut and didn't allow it to go into their circulation. It was called the second effect, the second meal effect. It's just an amazing food, and we need to eat more of it.
Well, some of those dark vegetables that you showed earlier on the screen, I had not been eating, although I do eat them. They were kind of taught when I put them in the smoothie, but you recommended stevia.
Yeah.
And it helped it out, as well as apples and bananas. It made all the difference in the world. My bad result, trying to make this sudden change in a 2 weeks period of time, is that it took X amount of pounds off of me. That was not good for me. It takes me forever to pick them up. Okay, so what can I use to further put into this green mix that will not take weight off of me?
This is actually a beautiful question because calories matter. So for people who want to focus on calories, we say don't, because if you're eating healthy and you're eating enough to satiate you, your body will rest at a certain, and you're getting enough protein and all of that stuff, it will rest at a certain place where it needs to. But if you want to, there are higher calorie foods. I mean, the meats, the cheeses, and all that. But even the unprocessed ones, anything that's oil, we're not against oil. We're not against olive oil, extra virgin olive oil. Now, a teaspoon of olive oil is 200 calories. So add a little teaspoon of calories to maintain, not a lot. Now, I said olive oil was good to one of my patients, and they came with a bottle the next month. I'm like, why did you bring this? He said, oh, you said it was good, so I have 3 cups of this a day. I'm like, I have to be careful with my language. We say just spray. We don't even say cook, we spray. But for people that are losing weight and they're worried about it, first of all, increase your weight by protein. And so, on a tangent, hunger. We're doing an entire thing on hunger. 3 things mitigates hunger. One is volume. Your stomach has sensors, so eating a lot of food that has volume is going to mitigate hunger. So a bowl of salad this big has how many calories? without anything on it.
Oh,
Not even, yeah, 100, 150, 200. Yeah. A steak this big is 400 calories. A cup of, a teaspoon of fat is 200 calories. So we have to get a relationship with those calories. So eating a lot of food that's greens and vegetables and things like that makes you feel full. The other thing that makes you feel full is chewing. Chewing is a very powerful source of satiation. So chew more. In this conversation that we had about a month ago, somebody said chew 30 times. I'm like, by the time I'm done with 30 times, I barely have my teeth, But at least chew 10 times, 10 times. The third is protein. Now, when you have beans, it's got lots of volume. It expands, actually. It has fiber, all the things that Ayesha said. And also it has protein. And it's also satiating. And it also has some calories. Beans are a little higher calorie. So just look at that. In that little conversation, we have the calorie, but good calorie, taking away the bad fats, adding minerals, vitamins, and volume, and chewing. That's a good place.
So we know that stevia works. What about agave nectar and Splenda? I don't think Splenda is good.
That's a really good question. So what is sugar, right? And there's so many different types of sugar out there in the market, and some of them are labeled as healthy, some of them are labeled as unhealthy. Now, if I had to summarize it, which I will, sugar is sugar. Whether it's white table sugar or brown sugar or Tasmanian sugar or agave syrup or pancake syrup or honey or maple syrup, right? So maple syrup might be much better than, a little better than processed sugar, but sugar is sugar because they are broken down into either sucrose, glucose, or fructose, and it gets absorbed and it does the same thing. As far as artificial sugars are concerned, and by the way, we need to reduce these. We need to reduce sugar consumption as much as possible and try to eat unprocessed sugars, which are found in fruits, vegetables, whole wheat bread. Those are complex carbohydrates that are good for you. People hate the word carbs. They're like, oh, I'm not eating carbs. But there's so many different types of carbs. So complex carbohydrates are good. Simple carbohydrates like sugars are not good for your health. As far as artificial sugars are concerned, some of them are good. Stevia is good. Monk fruit is good. Erythritol is good. Why? Because they're low calorie. They don't act like sugar, but they taste wonderful. Right? They do actually act like table sugar without the calories, without the inflammation, without the oxidation. Some of them, like Splenda and aspartame, have been completely vilified, saying, oh, this causes dementia or brain diseases. We actually don't have very clean evidence for it. But the ones that we're comfortable with are monk fruit sweetener, erythritol, xylitol, all the alls, the sugars that have an OL at the end. These are alcohol sugars. They're good. Some people can get some GI disturbances like gas and some other GI issues with them, but a lot of people don't, so they can consume it in their coffee and their sugar, whatever, drinks, everything else.
Last comment, Dr. Dean. I do a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil in the smoothie, but I also put a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. What's your take on apple cider vinegar?
It's fantastic. It's
Okay.
great. Yep.
Okay.
We use it. It's great. We use it with a lot of things. As a salad dressing, vinegar with some stevia or something like that is absolutely amazing because sometimes I need some taste on my salad, right? And the dressings, even the ones that say they're light dressing, you should read all the chemicals and all. It's just terrible. So vinegar, 0 calories, minimal calories. It has the 3 amazing things is you can put artificial sweeteners like stevia or monk fruit on anything. Popcorn. We have popcorn on Friday nights, movie time, with the family, we do that. But on salad dressing, those 3, lemon, vinegar, and some artificial sweetener, you can make amazing combinations of salad dressing, which has got 0 calories, and it's got amazing taste. And just experiment, see what taste. Our taste profiles change. By the way, taste is habit. Let's end with that. The thing that alters people is, whenever we talk to people say, but bacon. But what does that mean, but bacon? I know, I used to eat bacon. Because you have a habit, right? It has a certain taste. Sweets. Now I can tell you that when we came back from Italy, I would never say this. I said this to Angie. I was craving salads. Because there was a lot of carbs. And we have nothing against carbs, but it was like overwhelming amount of carbs, right? So your taste is not taste. Taste is habit. You develop this habit. You live a certain way other things become disturbing to you. When I have a little bit too much fat, like the other, I get headaches. For the first time, I was like getting beginnings of headaches. I'm like, oh my God, it was the food that I was having. So don't worry about taste. Your taste will adjust so much that you will be shocked. For those who have traveled, and when some community brings you their favorite food and you're like, oh my God, how could theirs be their favorite food? It's not because they don't have taste. It's that because it's a habitual thing that people grow with. It's a habitual thing that we can grow with, which is healthy eating, healthy tastes, and all of that as well.
Speaking of monk fruit, you made monk fruit tacos when you were last here, right? What are jackfruit? Okay. Either way, jackfruit, thank you very much. It's not in your book under recipes. Is that something new that you just discovered?
Oh, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I cook all the time.
Right.
So yes,
Okay.
I made that recently, yeah.
Jackfruit. Thank you
Jackfruit
for that
tacos, yeah.
correction.
No
Thank you.
problem. Yeah.
Okay.
It's,
Go ahead.
it's a fruit. It's found in Southeast Asian countries. It's very big. You can actually find it here in some stores as well. It's very fibrous. If it's ripe, it's very sweet, but if it's not, it's very fibrous, and it's a really good texture. It kind of reminds you of pulled pork if you put the right spices in it, but it doesn't have the calories, and it's just delicious.
By the way, you'll be getting these recipes very soon from the community chefs here. And it will be the kind of recipes that you're familiar with, that is going to be tasty, healthy, and easy. Tasty, healthy, easy. So you'll be getting a lot of these recipes fairly soon.
Last two questions, and they came from our online listeners. Can talking on the phone be a social outlet, or do we need to meet face to face?
Let me answer that one.
Please.
Yes. Who are you talking to? Yeah, that matters. I mean, some phone calls, we trap ourselves in this habitual toxic relationships. I want to talk to that. And then we keep going for that. Stop those. Because a lot of times all talk is not good. So if the talk is challenging, fun, I'll tell you even this. Put yourself in uncomfortable conversations to push you. Because a lot of times we get comfortable with the same thing over and over again, over and over again. I was talking to my cousins the other day, and it was, oh my God, I'm back in Pittsburgh talking about Steelers over and over again. I was getting a little claustrophobic again. I'm like, this is, so put yourself in situations on the phone. That's why absolutely, we're in an age of phone, we're in an age of Zoom, we're in an age of computer. Put yourself in conversations that you're not familiar with, that's pushing you, that's teaching you, that's growing you, that's enabling you. Or more importantly, you're teaching, you're growing, you're enabling others.
Last question. Sea moss is a trending topic right now. What are your thoughts?
It's not very common, so sea moss is used in different ways. It actually, it helps with coagulation. It kind of thickens food. It may have some minerals, but honestly, trying to look at sea moss and kind of forgetting about apples, bananas, and spinach is kind of silly, So I'd say just stick to the things that we have around us. But yeah, sea moss is great, but it's not something magical that does have magical qualities. So far, at least, so far as much as we know.
Thank you both so much. Let's give them a round of applause. We greatly appreciate you. You may be seated. You have another comment?
Nothing other than just gratitude and deep thanks to you all, to Pastor and his family, to my lovely sister, Dr. Angela Evans, Dr. Betty, Michael, Cheryl, everyone in the family. Thank you for having us. Thank you for being a part of this community. Thank you for being a part of this movement, of this revolution for healthcare. Each and every one of us are a health ambassador. So every one of you going out into your communities, into your homes, we hope that you take this message of hope with you and disperse it into your communities, because this is true health, as Dean said. And I wanted to end it with that. This is true health. It doesn't happen in the clinic. It doesn't happen in the hospitals. It happens in these kind of conversations. So I'm so grateful to you all for being here, and to everybody who's watching online as well. Thank you all very much, and we hope to stay connected with you all.
Thank you.